Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of Perth and Kinross Licensing Committee. I'm Bailey Mike Williamson, convener of the committee, and I'm joined by my vice convener, Councillor Ian McPherson. I'm also joined by other members of the committee alongside Mona McLaren, who's Deputy Clerk and Solicitor on my left, and Engelberts, who's Licence Enforcement Officer, Shona Mihi, and Jessica Guild, who's the Clerk of the committee. Can I now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies received for this morning's meeting and confirm attendance of those in the chamber and online?
Thank you, convener. We have a few apologies this morning from Councillor Allen, Bailey Brock, Councillor Carr, Councillor Chan, Councillor Frampton, Councillor Reid and Councillor Stewart. We have one member online, Councillor Braun. Can you confirm you're present online, please?
Yes, I'm here, Jess.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chambers, convener.
Thank you. Could I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect to the business on the agenda today? Take it there are no declarations of interest today. So we now move on to paper 3, which is a grant of a short-term let license. It's a new operation at 6 the Paddock Octorada. Members, this application is page 5 onwards in your document pack. For this item of business, we are joined via phone by the applicants, Dr. and Mrs. Pringle. We're also joined via phone by objector to the application, Mr. Andrew Richards, and in the chambers by objectors Lord Colin Leach and Mr. Frank Johnson. I will now hand over to Mona McLaren, who will introduce a report and advise on the procedure.
Yes, this is an application for a 3-year short-term let licence, and it's been brought before the committee because of there have been objections received.
Thank you. I will now invite Mr. Johnson to provide details of his objection. Is that correct?
Thank you, convener, and thank you for affording me the opportunity of speaking to my objections this morning. Perhaps if I, as a preliminary few comments, just summarise very briefly, the paddock is a small cul-de-sac in Octorada, which is made up of 8 detached dwelling houses. It's a dead end. There's one entrance to the paddock, and the applicant's property is towards the rear, towards the bottom of the paddock. Now, it's an exclusively entirely residential area, and my fundamental concern is that the application to run the business of a short-term let business at one of the houses here, which is diagonally opposite to mine. I'm not immediately adjacent to it, but it's diagonally opposite, but still very proximate to my house. My concern is that the running of a short-term let business in the paddock will raise primarily 2 major issues. One is a public safety issue, and 2 is a material risk of nuisance to the residents and to other persons coming on to the paddock. So I think what I'll do is, you've had an opportunity of looking at my objection. I'll think just very briefly speak through it if you give me the time to do so. The first objection is public safety, and the license which has been applied for is to run a business at which a maximum of 8 individuals could be guests in the property at 6 the Paddock. And my concern is that if there were 8 separate cars, 8 cars parked in the number 6 or around the property at number 6, this would cause a potential for all sorts of public safety issues and nuisance issues. It's inherent in the application that there's a risk of an additional 8 cars. Now, I accept within my objection that it's perfectly possible that there could be 7 cars, there could be 6 cars, there could be 5 cars, there could be 4 cars. But if the application was granted as it currently stands, it's perfectly possible, and it's inherent in that application, that 8 cars could be parked there. 8 people could come from either different families or different individuals. And in all fairness to the applicant, we have endeavoured to have some correspondence in relation to this. He has made the offer to reduce the number of people, the number of cars that would be allowed to park at the premises to 3 or 4, because I concede that it's certainly 3 and possibly even 4 might be able to park in the driveway. And the driveway's open, it's not screened, so it still would look a bit of a car lot. But the applicant has made that proposal. So I accept that there's a case that the smaller number of cars may be parked, but it's inherent that 8 cars could be parked there. Now, even if only 3 or 4 cars are parked on the driveway, and I don't think the driveway could encompass more than 4, that would leave the possibility of 5 or 4 cars being parked by guests staying at the property in the cul-de-sac, potentially blocking access for emergency vehicles such as fire engines, ambulances or police vehicles. And this is a public safety issue for guests staying at the property and also for residents who live in other houses in the cul-de-sac. There's a traffic safety hazard if people are parking their cars on the pavement. Indeed, parking cars is now illegal from the 10th of December due to the Transport Scotland Act, although it's not being enforced, I understand, but nonetheless it's illegal for individuals to park their cars on pavements. And the reason behind that legislation, of course, is it's accepted that if you park cars on pavements, that can cause an obstruction to people using the pavements, mothers with prams, children, passers-by, dog walkers, who are then forced onto the street. So if they don't park in the paddock, if people staying at the paddock don't park at the applicant's house at number 6 the paddock, don't park on the pavement, they could park in the street. And immediately adjacent to the property in respect of which the application is made, there is a turning bay for people driving in and out of the paddock, which I suspect is, in real terms, it's very likely that guests may park their cars, and that would prohibit other users in the paddock and persons residing there from using that turning bay. Tesco vans come in all the time, visitors, friends, family, and delivery vans, milkmen as well. So 4 or 5 cars belonging to guests staying in the paddocks are parked in the street and in the cul-de-sac. There's an excessive number of cars requiring the residents of the paddock to park elsewhere. And it also has the potential for people perhaps trying to park their cars on Orcho Road, which is a very busy road, and it's the road in which the paddock, the cul-de-sac, joins onto. So the purpose of the turning bay could be, and is in my view very likely to be, thwarted, which is a public safety issue, it's a driving issue, and it's a pedestrian issue as well. And it's a nuisance issue for those who want to turn their cars there but can't because there are people parked there. The parking of the cars, you have my submissions before me. I hope they're fairly concise. I'm not going to take you through absolutely everything in this, but if cars are parked on the pavement, it's a problem. If they're not parked on the pavement, and they're parked on the street, it can also be a problem. So there are public safety issues, material public safety issues in my view, if there are 8 people staying with cars, even 7 cars, 6 cars. If there are 4 cars parked entirely on the premises, that argument would be less compulsory, it would be less persuasive. But there is also a material risk of nuisance in terms of the noise of people staying at the paddock. Now, I've tried to identify any instances where applications for short-term licenses have been refused by councils, and by this council I've not been able to come to any, so I accept that. And I've read the policy position of the council in relation to such applications, and I accept entirely that there are some commercial reasons for allowing individuals to conduct the businesses of short-term let. But in my view, in addition to the public safety potential, particularly if this application is granted, which would potentially allow 8 cars to be parked there, and I've not really commented on the aesthetic part that would actually convert it into a parking lot. But my position is that there's a real material risk of an undue nuisance in relation to both the parking, but also to the noise. So I'm not going to go through word for word my issues with the safety any more than I've done already, but I'll turn to the undue nuisance in relation to the use of the exterior rear patio and the patio on the right of the property. So my house is situated diagonally opposite the applicant's house. If I look at the applicant's house, there's a large patio to the right behind a wooden fence, and there's another patio at the back of his house. The risk of guests staying there, in real terms, people coming on holiday, whether they're golfers, whether it's a very expensive golf outing or expensive address to stay at, I'm not sure. I don't think it really matters. The risk of people partying there late at night is a reasonably material risk, and one which I really would rather I didn't have to contend to my retirement. But the outdoor patio on the right would probably cause a much more significant risk to me. And this is the patio that's immediately adjacent and is overlooked by the window of the people staying, of the couple who reside at number 7, the paddock. So the 2 outdoor patios pose a heightened risk of noise disturbance made by guests and the property having social gatherings, conversations, playing music and other activities at the outside patios. Now, it's perfectly possible to say, oh, that's unlikely, but in real terms, I think it's probably within the knowledge of this committee that people on holiday do conduct themselves in a particular way that can be noisy. And there have been instances of this before. I think there was an objection in relation to a short-term licence granted, and I think restrictions may have been granted into a property at Townhead in Auchterarder. But I'm concerned that the noise emanating from the patios would disrupt the peaceful enjoyment of other residents, and in particular myself and the other residents within the paddock. So there's public nuisance, a material risk of public nuisance, a material risk of public safety issues, which is diminished if the applicant still wishes to concede that he would restrict the numbers of cars staying there to 4. But that's a matter for him. You have my submissions, which are in detail before you, but I do conclude my submissions with my objections with 2 representations. One is the parking assessment. I assume that that's been carried out now, and that some form of report has been made back to the committee on that. The other is the rubbish and refusal disposal arrangements, that if the committee is inclined to grant the application, then I would like some form of comfort in knowing that if 8 individuals are staying at the property, there are not going to be industrial bins out to the front of the property overspilling and making a mess of the cul-de-sac. Now, I'm quite happy to take any questions that the committee wish to put to me in relation to the objections I put forward.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Do members have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Okay, I'll start with Councillor Robertson, alongside Councillor Harvey.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for your presentation. Are there anything in the deeds of your properties limiting the number of vehicles that can be parked, given that it's quite open at the front and there's lots of room for parking? But is there a limit on the number of cars that you as a householder can actually have parked at your property as part of your deeds?
Sorry, thank you for your question. There is, in relation to my property, I understand that there's a restriction on the number of cars that I can park at my property, and the restriction is to 2 cars. I'm not allowed to have a caravan there, nor am I allowed to have, I think, commercial vehicles. I have put before the council the title deeds of the applicant, and I do not think, and certainly the title deeds in relation to number 6 do not have a similar restriction on the number of cars, though there is a restriction on the occupier at number 6, the proprietor of number 6, the paddock, because he is prohibited from using the house for any other purpose other than a private dwelling house and for no other purpose whatsoever. And there's a prohibition on the proprietor from conducting a business. But I didn't see a restriction, at least, to the number of cars that he may park at his property. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Okay, thanks very much. It was similar to Councillor Robertson's question I was going to ask, but I'll just ask another question since I'm just looking at your street on Google Maps there as well. So you would say at least the maximum 2 cars could fit into the parking place of number 6, or I think there's possibly more could fit in there. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. No, I've looked. I've not measured this, but I would estimate that 3 cars can certainly park in the flat area of number 6, possibly 4 cars. But yeah. But sorry if I can add, but that's why I think the applicant did concede that he would be prepared to restrict the number of cars to 3 or 4. I don't know whether the applicant is still happy to make that restriction, though.
Sorry, convener, just a follow up. So you said you'd had discussions with the applicant, and is there any finality to the 3 or 4 vehicles?
No, that's not been a matter that's finalised. That offer was made to restrict it to 3 or 4 vehicles, but in view of my concern regarding safety issues in terms of the potential for 8, I thought it was appropriate, and the nuisance issue I thought it appropriate to come this morning, but I don't know whether the applicant's still happy with that concession or not. But certainly, I think 3 or 4 cars could probably be parked, squeezed onto the front of his property. Might not be it would be pretty unsightly, but they could do that, yeah.
Sorry, I picked up Councillor Anderson and wanted a question, and obviously he doesn't. My question is there any parking locally, alternative forms of parking locally, say for example opposite at a golf course? I'm not sure how far away that is, but
Sorry, thank you. Of course. Thank you. In terms, there's only street parking in the paddock, apart from driveways. Orchel Road is a busy road. It's a major artery that connects the road to Crieff to the town of Auchterarder. It would not. There are generally no park. There's very few. It's very rare for there to be cars parked there. Parking would be available at the golf club, which I think would probably be at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes walk away, but that might be parking which is exclusively for use of members of the club. I can't think of any public parking that would be easily accessible from the paddock.
okay, thank you very much. I take it there are no further questions for Mr. Johnson. If there are no further questions for Mr.
Convener, sorry, yes, I put a question in the chat and you missed me, I think.
Okay, no problems. Okay.
A couple of questions, if I may. Thank you for your deputation, Mr. Johnson. A couple of things. You were talking about parking on the drive. There is a garage there as well. What I would assume would take 2 cars. So, in theory, you could put 4 on there without too much of a problem, and that would leave another space, perhaps 1 more. Would the garage will obviously take some of the pressure away? Would you agree?
No, there are 2 individual garages built into the house. I don't know if they're available for parking, but the applicant has said that in theory, he could park 2 cars. Guests could have 2 cars parked within the garage, which is, I would suspect, is a bit of a manoeuvre, particularly if it was a large car. So 2 cars. They also, I think, indicated, if my recollection is correct, that 2 cars could be driven into the back patio by moving the fence, swinging the fence. There's a gate to the fence. So it'd be the side patio, so they could have 4 cars there, and they could have 4 cars in the front, I think. But I think it's extremely unlikely that individuals who are possibly, who would be driving their cars into the garage. I can't discount the possibility, but I think it would be awkward, inconvenient for them to do so, and it's unlikely that in real terms they would.
Fine, thank you. And a second question, Convener, if I may. I want to go back to the point you raised regarding the deeds. Now, you said that you're restricted to 2, but there's not a restriction on the property opposite. And you said he's restricted, he can't run a commercial business from there. I wonder if that was in your deeds as well. It's unusual when you have a development like this of
Councillor Braun, the deeds aren't within our remit.
Right, okay.
That's a private issue.
Yeah, okay, fine, okay.
Do you have any further questions, Councillor Braun?
Sorry, no, that was going to be my second question. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Convener and committee, if I may make just a concluding comment. I retired 2.5 years ago up to Auchterarder. It's a very quiet residential property. I don't really want constant comings and goings with people banging the car doors when I'm asleep, or I go to bed early, I get up early. It just would materially change the character and entirely residential nature of this this cul-de-sac, which is a very small cul-de-sac, if there was a business of short-term lets with people coming and going several times a day, possibly, with guests staying for 2-3 days a week or whatever, I would have no problem, I suspect, with, yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it there and I'll conclude my comments. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for your time. Lord Leach. Yes, sure. Yes, it's okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Lord Leach. Could I ask if you could provide details of your objection?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Okay. No doubt you've all read my objection. Similar to Mr. Johnson's, emergency services access. It's a very, very small cul-de-sac in Auchterarder, and limited parking. I'm right next door. I'm number 7 in the paddock, and I have a double garage which both our cars are in, and probably parking outside for another 2 cars if I wanted. But you wouldn't be able to get the cars out of the garage if you did that. So the access is very limited. You can't double park now, and it's a narrow cul-de-sac with a turning circle, which is right between the houses number 6 and 7 as a turning circle, which you couldn't. Lorries would have to turn there. If the cars were parked there, lorries couldn't turn. That would be a major problem. So my limited parking is one. Parking in the terminal bay, as I said, would be a problem as well, because I mean, okay, I run a Range Rover, but I mean, I could do a new point turn, but a big truck coming couldn't do that. So need to access the turning bay, or the only way they could turn was go into my driveway. I've got a big driveway at the front. They could go into that, which I really don't want. My second objection is nuisance and safety. As I said, I'm right next door. If parties were going to come and they're going to be late at night, I mean, I'm right next door. I overlook their garden. It would be a major problem. I suffered pneumonia about 2 years ago, and my wife's got asthma. And the last thing I want is vaping coming over and causing us a problem. As Mr. Johnson mentioned, social hours. I mean, it's a very limited. Auchterarder's a small place. This cul-de-sac is very small, and the residents in that cul-de-sac. I mean, I'm 81. Most of them are over 80. The average age of them is over 70. So it does concern me that if you were going to have 2 people coming twice a week to stay in the house to change, or for golfing holidays and that, there would be noise, there would be problems. I'm a golfer. I know what golfers are like at night, so fair enough. They've got to enjoy themselves. But I think it would be a problem, and that's why I'm objecting. But I appreciate you hearing my objection, and that's basically it's the same as what Mr. Johnson is. It's a small area, but the main thing is, one of the things is most of the people in the cul-de-sac are over 80, and the last thing they want is noisy neighbours. Thank you very much for seeing me.
Thank you, Lord Leach. Do members have any questions for Lord Leach? Councillor Harvey.
Good morning, Lord Leach. Thanks for joining us. Just a quick question. Which number of the road are you staying in?
I'm 7.
Okay, thanks.
May I ask a question of Lord Leach? Is about you've mentioned a couple of times about lorries going down the cul-de-sac. How frequently does that actually happen?
there will be a lorry, I would think, because people order online now, so people get deliveries twice a day. That's quite a lot. I can also comment. I lived abroad for over 20 years. I had two houses. I had a flat at Glen Eagles and this house, and I didn't let it out because I knew it might cause problems for the neighbours.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for Lord Leach? Online? There appears to be no further questions for you, Lord Leach. If you'd like to remain, and we can get you to sum up later. Thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Richards to provide details of his objection. He's on the phone, is that correct? Thank you. Mr. Richards, could you start? Oh, there we go. We can hear you, Mr. Richards.
Good morning.
Mr. Richards, could you provide details of your objection?
Yes, happily. So firstly, good morning. Hello everybody. Hello Colin. Hello Frank. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to share with you. Actually, they're predominantly the objections of my mother rather than me. It's my mother who lives in the house. I think my first comment is I'd just like to echo what was said by Frank and Colin, and also particularly the way they described this area. My mother is 84 years old. She bought the house 25 years ago. It was designated as a residential area, and that's what they fell in love with, and that's why, and she's enjoyed living there for the last 25 years, because it is exactly as described, a very quiet residential area where I think everybody knows each other and everybody cares for each other in that cul-de-sac. It's really quite a special environment. But the reason for my objection is actually the amount of potential disturbance. As we've heard a number of times, we're talking about up to 8 guests. So that could potentially mean a lot of cars relative to the size of the place, potentially a lot of coming and going, and potentially a lot of outdoor activity, certainly much more than the area has been designed for. So the objection is really, you've heard the comments on safety from Frank, and I would just, from our side, we really want to highlight the potential disturbance that this can cause and potential disruption to what is a really special residential environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Do members have any questions for Mr. Richards? Online, there are no questions for you, Mr. Richards, so thank you very much for coming in. Would you be happy just to remain where you are, and I'll need to ask you to sum up later. I will now invite Dr. and Mrs. Pringle to provide details of their application. They're on the phone as well. Can you hear us, Mr. Pringle? You just press *6, Mr. Pringle, to unmute yourself.
Oh, hello?
Hello there, Mr. Pringle. We can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, convener and the committee, for hearing our application.
Okay, Mr. Pringle, could you provide details of your objection, or their application in response to the objections?
Okay. Firstly, Linda and I were very sorry that we didn't communicate our plans to our neighbours better. Unfortunately, we cannot undo this, and I won't provide any excuses for that. We bought the house in early 22, and we carried out significant internal and external upgrades to the property. The property had suffered from almost neglect for the last large number of years, so I feel we improved the property in that cul-de-sac that's been amply described by our neighbours today. We did not know then that I was going to be sent on a secondment to Canada, and this now looks like continuing for at least another 2.5 years. Unfortunately, our house has not kept well being vacant. No houses do. And it was extensively damaged last year due to a simple burst water pipe that went unnoticed and has been uninhabitable for the last 8 months now, while it was dried and repaired by the insurers. We don't want to tenant the house permanently because we still want to use the house as our base each time we come, either Linda or myself or both of us come home, and for the occasional use by friends and family staying there. Therefore, it was our plan to try and offer it for short-term lets. Our plan is to specialise in higher-end lettings, if I can describe it like that, and in our case, specifically focus on obviously Dun Eagles and the local golf and any other kind of big events that might take place in that area. As it is our home, we have the same natural concerns about our neighbours in terms of any guests that would stay there. And we intend to only let the house to visitors who have been kind of vetted for their type, if I can describe that, and it will only be available on a premium pricing structure. And we very much expect this to limit the occupancy rate. We're not looking to make the house available to party type groups, and each guest booker will be checked prior to accepting their booking, and they'll be required to place a significant good order bond that's not returned until the guests until after the house has been checked after each stay. And this is on top of a significant deposit taken at booking, and full payment is required before arrival. So I would hope that would filter out any just casual lastminute.com type guests being attracted to the house. It will be people who have to significantly consider what type of holiday and stay that they're looking for. And then very much we have no intention of risking our own house being abused. So that's in our own interest. This is not a commercial property that we've bought or invested in. It's our home, and we're not able to use it ourselves at the moment. And nor do we wish to cause any issues for our neighbours, and that's a key one. We bought that house in that location very much because we intend to live there and ultimately retire there ourselves. So we're not looking to create any issues for our neighbours, because we will be returning there within a couple of years to live ourselves. So that's the kind of the background. In terms of the objections that we've heard so far from our neighbours, we note the very common concern of safety in relation to guest cars. However, we do make the point, and I think it has probably already come out, but I do disagree with the characterisation of the house as limited parking. The house was actually one of the very first built in the cul-de-sac, and it's a very different exterior layout to all the other houses. It was actually designed with extensive, and I'm going to use the word extensive, off-road parking. You can, and I've measured all, you can park 4 cars comfortably on the ample parking outside the house. I do take Frank's point that would make it look a little bit like a parking lot, but the off-road parking is available at the house. But on top of that, and I do disagree, the house has a large front-facing double garage, and it is a large double garage. Cars can go in and out with ease there. And the other thing that the house has is the right-hand side patio. When we bought the house, the first thing I did was open up the side gate to become a double gate specifically for off-road parking, and 2 cars fit into that side of the house with ease. So the house can accommodate comfortably up to 8 cars, albeit you have to park them some inside, then some on the outside. So my main point is the house has extensive external parking. However, absolutely hear our neighbours' concerns, and 8 cars, 7 cars, 6 cars, 5 cars, far too many. We would not want to put that burden on that cul-de-sac. And so we will offer the committee, if it would help the committee, absolutely to cap the number of cars that guests would have to 4, if that would help. So that we would be happy to take that restriction. And we'd like to think that a restriction like that, would help mitigate our neighbours' concerns for the potential for public safety and undue nuisance. There's also no reason why guests would choose to park their vehicles in what is a public road, on the pavement or in the turning circle. The house has extensive parking, easy just to drive onto. So I do feel that any fears of parking on the pavement or in the turning circle they're not. There's no reason why guests would want to put their cars in that public area. Then I turn then to the other major concern of our neighbours, that is the common concern about potential evening noise disturbance or any noise disturbance. Again, the house has been wrongly characterised because we disagree. The house arguably has two patios, one out the rear, small one, and then the large one at the right-hand side. But we believe that these areas will not be used for outside entertainment, and the main reason is we don't use them for outside entertainment because neither receive any evening sunshine. They are quite dark, and due to the house's high roofline and the surrounding trees, our garden has a lot of large trees on the boundary, and they're quite enclosed, and they're dark, uninviting places, to be honest. So although we will put a small table and chairs in the back garden, because that does receive very nice morning sunshine, we will put no furniture in the side, right-hand side patio, and that is actually an area that we promote or will promote in the advertising as an area for secure off-street locked parking. So it's not an area that's promoted for any sort of evening or party activity, and that right-hand side patio is the only one that does have an aspect that would potentially out onto the street. But again, it's screened by bushes and trees, but it's not a place that we would offer any patio equipment. And again, this is a condition that we would offer to have placed on our license, that there would be no outside furniture to be available in that area. And these facts are all a simple visit to the house or a check on Google Earth, should confirm the spacious and secluded nature of our house. And then just lastly, there's also a concern for rubbish disposal. And again, like everyone else, our house has a full complement of the council bins, and we have actually doubles for most of them. And however, our neighbours will not experience any negative impact from guest rubbish. The bins will continue to be retained out of public sight behind our main side gate. And should we be granted the license and we get into letting the house, we'll use a property management company who will turn the house over after each guest stay. And part of that service is that they will remove all the rubbish from these bins and guests. None of the rubbish will go through into the council bins, and so no bins will be left out in the street, and there will be no question of us having any industrial bins as part of this license. And again, that can be written in as a condition of the license if that would help the committee. So that's really our statement, and I thank the committee for the time in hearing our position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pringle. I have a question to begin with. It's about your property management. Where is this company based?
In Stirling, although we haven't decided fully on who we would use yet. We started this process a year ago, and then the house suffered all the damage, so we've kind of put that on hold. But we interviewed a couple of properties, but Stirling is where everyone was based. Oh no, one was in Crieff. So I would say they're local.
Thank you. And would residents of the cul-de-sac, if the committee was so minded to grant a licence, be able to have access to that property management contact details so that they could respond to any concerns that residents may have of public nuisance?
Yes, and all our personal details, and I have significant family in the area. We would ensure, because again, I want to assure the committee that we would take neighbour any complaints or actual disturbance very seriously, and we would ensure all neighbours had very easy access to let us know there was a problem.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions for Mr. and Mrs. Pringle? Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, convener. Thanks, Dr. Pringle, for joining us today. I've got a couple of questions, if the convener will allow. Could you just go through, start off your presentation, which was very good, thank you. You mentioned that you chose to do short-term lets rather than long-term letting. Can you just go through the reasoning for that, please? Thanks.
Thank you. The reason really is, as I say, we didn't know we were going to be sent to Canada to work. And we've got a house that we had just bought. It's got a mortgage on it. It's also suffered the damage, which we then realised, the house doesn't sit well, and it's got a mortgage, and we are aware of the income that can be attained from short-term lets, particularly in the kind of Gleneagles area with the golf. So it's fairly basic reasoning that the house can earn some money, because I don't get any compensation for the house being with my work. So yes, it's to have the house work for us and to keep it in good managed order when we're away.
Which would be still something you could do if you rented it long-term lease, though.
So that, sorry, and that's the other key one. It's myself that's actually on secondment, and we've just recently had grandchildren, or grandchild, and so it's for us to come. We come back home. I come back home quarterly, but my wife can come back home whenever she wants. That is part of our secondment, and so it's so that we have a home base to come back and live. So that wouldn't suit the long-term letting arrangement. We do want to still use it as our home, and it's all furnished as our home.
Okay, fair enough. The other question I had, you said you'll be seconded for, is it 2 to 3 years, you said? I understand you're in the sea farm business. Where is it you're based in Canada?
Yes. So we're in New Brunswick. We stay in Rothesay, New Brunswick, and I work out in Newfoundland. And
how long do you think it's going to be? 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years?
So my contract is 3 years, and the company have a right to ask me to complete the 4th year, which they will almost certainly do. So that started in the beginning of July 22. So it's maximum 4 years from 22, from July 22.
Okay, so another 2.5 years. Okay, thanks, convener.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Pringle or Dr. Pringle? No questions? Mr. Pringle, Dr. Pringle, I have, I apologise. My question is about, previously the committee has been minded to introduce a curfew on property so that there's no outside music, etc., beyond a certain time. If the committee was so minded to grant an application for this license, what would your thoughts be if the committee were to introduce a curfew on this particular property?
To be honest, I think, assuming it wasn't 5, 6, or I'm assuming it'd be something like 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night. Then we'll be fine with that, because we're genuine in what we say. I'm the first person myself to be upset if there's a lot of outside activity going on at a house. So yes, we would accept that with no problem.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Anderson.
Just concerned, you mentioned if family interests in the area, in Octorardy area, you're talking about taking on possibly a firm in Stirling to manage the property. It's a little run from Stirling if there's an emergency, anything else to come up from, but are the family, you mentioned family in the area, how close are they to the property?
So they are in near Kinross. They're in Stirling, Falkirk, and out at Callander. So all of us, that's similar, kind of 30 minutes away, or 30 minutes to an hour away.
Okay, and I think you said you'd be quite happy, well, once you fix up with a management company who hopefully work 24 hours, but you're quite willing to give the residents, other residents, the paddocks, contact details to them. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions online? Okay, I would like to now invite Mr. Johnson to sum up, please.
Thank you, Mr. Convener. My wife and I, who are aged 66 and 65, are probably the youngsters in the paddock. Looking at the residents immediately opposite the applicant's house and adjacent to it, or immediately near it, the proprietors at 3, 4, 5 and 7, I would estimate probably have an average age of at least 77. This is a big issue in real going terms, no matter whether the cars, I mean, I appreciate the offer to restrict the cars, particularly as I think it's extremely unlikely that the garage kind of come with this. There's two single garages that are built into the house. I think if you look at it, Google online, so it's two single garages. It's actually going to be quite awkward for people to park in there. I can't discount the possibility that they would. If cars were driven through the gate, through the fence, if the fence was, or the gate and the fence was moved, and they were parked in the patio, that would mean that they were parking in the patio immediately overlooked by Lord Leach's bedroom, which actually would be an aggravating factor if cars were to be parked there with doors banging. If short-term let guests are coming to this business, they're staying there possibly for 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days a week, maybe a couple of weeks, but nonetheless, there'll be cleaners coming and going, people removing the rubbish coming and going, people coming to check the property, quite apart from individuals coming and going. It's going to completely, materially change for the worse the nature and the character of the cul-de-sac. It's a fundamental change. The applicant mentioned that he's trying to focus on premium guests, and I think the argument must be that wealthy guests, expensive guests, do not make noise, which is completely not the case. It's flawed thinking that. I accept that there may be a good order bond. I understand that the applicant is putting in place a good order bond, which I understand will allow him to take a sizable deposit or withhold the repayment of funds to guests staying at the paddock. But in effect, that means that if I'm up worried because there's noise or singing and dancing or fighting or whatever with people staying at number 6, that he exercises the deposit, he retains the money which goes into his bank account, but he doesn't have the discomfort, the anxiety, and that would be caused to my wife and to myself and other immediate residents of the paddock. It was an interesting point made in terms of a long-term lease, and that's an option. It may not be the best option for the applicant. I accept that, but it certainly is an option, and it would be an option which I would find infinitely preferable, because you can, with anybody staying there for a reasonable period of time, any reasonable person and reasonable nature, which I would like, reasonable neighbours I would like to consider I am, has an opportunity of developing a rapport with your neighbours. Say, look, we go to bed a wee bit earlier, would it be possible for you just not to be out there partying? You don't have that chance with people, with up to 8 people staying there for 2 or 3 days. Indeed, it could be quite threatening and intimidating and risky to go and try and speak to people in that situation if an issue develops. The agents, if they're down in Stirling, aren't going to come out. It would certainly be very helpful if we did have the contact details of that agency so that they can accost individuals if they can get up there in time. So I don't think the premium guests, the good order bond are really helpful. A long-term lease is a totally different nature to the paddock. That's the house would still be being used as a private domestic dwelling house. And a curfew in the property, well, that would be sensible as well. But I still have concerns that if this goes ahead with parking, with noise, with coming and going, even with restricted number of guests, and I appreciate the offer to restrict the number of cars to 4, though I think it would be really problematic if they were parking in the side patio. But it's going to materially and unfortunately change for the worse the nature and the character of what is a very residential, entirely residential property. I don't think I have anything else to add. If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Thank you. Could I please invite Lord Leach to sum up?
like Mr. Johnson, I agree virtually everything he says. I've got to say, I bought my premises when I'm right next door 20 years ago. Now, I was living abroad, but I didn't rent it out. But that property has been rented out long term for a long time, as long as I've been there. It's always been rented. Mr. Pringle's the only person that actually has bought it recently, because it always was owned by somebody else and rented out. But it was rented out to people who came for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So it wasn't a problem, and just used it as their home. What concerns me is whether they're golfers or anything, it doesn't matter. There's Auchterarder, there's Gleneagles, which is walking distance from the actual house. If there's two different families or two people changing every 2 or 3 days, that's going to be noisy. My wife's bedroom is right overlooking the back of their garden, and banging cars, opening cars, coming in and out. It's going to cause a problem. And people who are normally go to rent a house have, in the summertime, have a party outside. You can't really stop that. But if they have parties outside that are going to last for after 9 o'clock longer, and I next door, I have a house. I have a summer house which I quite often use at night in the summer. I don't make a noise, but I use it at night. And it is, yes, his back garden, Mr. Pringle's back garden is. It's got more trees than I have, but it's still, you can sit outside in the summer and enjoy yourself. It has a patio out the back, so you could actually do that and cause a bit of noise. With respect, he can't stop the people that rent it. They're only renting it for 2 or 3 days. They're going to enjoy themselves. It's very limited. It's very difficult to limit people. You can't make a noise, and that's the objection that I would say. That if you're renting it out for a year, couple of years, not a problem. But if you're renting it out for 2 or 3 days a week, you're going to have a noise. That's a dead certain. That's going to happen. I don't care who goes into it. They're going to enjoy themselves in the summertime. So that's. I think you've got to realise that. I've got to say to the committee, if you live next door, the way I am, would you like it if there's noisy? I don't think you would. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I please invite Mr. Richards to sum up?
Hello again. I just echo what Mr. Johnson and Lord Leach were saying there. I'm really struggling to see how granting a short-term license won't fundamentally change the special residential character of the paddock. And no matter what is done, there is a potential for significant disturbance. I believe in human nature, but I also believe that human nature will prevail here, and that it'll just be far too easy for cars to park in the wrong place. It's just too easy to park on the turning circle. That's going to cause inconvenience for everybody. When you're there for a short term, I'm just concerned that, yes, you're thinking more about your holiday than you are about your neighbours. So in general, I really don't see how operating such an operation won't fundamentally change characteristics of this cul-de-sac. So on that note, I would very much appreciate anything that the committee can do, Dr. Pringle can do, to either prevent any disturbance or minimise any disturbance. And from my perspective, a better solution would be a longer-term let where, my mother and the neighbours have a chance to better engage and develop a rapport and an understanding with who's ever there. And I just don't see that with a short-term let. But anyway, I think it's been some good conversation, and I thank everybody for the time to present my concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Could I now invite Dr. and Mrs. Pringle to sum up?
Thank you. I'll say, I'm not really going to say too much. I've gone through the points in terms of the direct objections, but the one little bit I will speak back to is we've heard the cul-de-sac kind of very much being characterised as a quiet, special, residential kind of natured street. And I'm going to say, and these things are perceptions, they're perceived. So from my own perception, I would very differently characterise the paddock cul-de-sac. It's a cul-de-sac, but it's also surrounded on the outside of the cul-de-sac by other cul-de-sacs and other residential areas. And as such, the cul-de-sac itself, it's a wide, I'm going to say a wide open, spacious cul-de-sac, again, my perception, but we have delivery vans in and out daily. We have kids playing in the street when grandchildren and that are around. And hence, I'm just going to make a quick point here. The reason that it is easy to get into the large double garage and the large off-street parking is because I am actually a car person myself. And to avoid the kids' balls hitting my cars, it's easy to get cars off the street and away from that public park. I'll just make that point. But it's a normal part of Ochterarder. We have dogs barking over the fence from other neighbours out with the cul-de-sac. You know, we hear music from other houses at night, and there's often large fireworks from other neighbours not too far away. So I'd say the cul-de-sac is very normal. It is not a quiet care home type or retirement type cul-de-sac. It's a vibrant cul-de-sac. And you know, and I would point out that yes, and I don't want to minimise our neighbours' concerns, and we will look to mitigate them, and we'll react to any issue that should arise. But I do point out that the majority of the neighbours in the street have not sought to object to our application, nor have any wider neighbours sought to object. So, as I say, I just slightly want to recharacterise the cul-de-sac, and I absolutely do not believe that short-term letting is going to materially change the nature of the paddock. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Dr. Pringle. Could I please bring in Karen Engelbert, please, for comment on the property management?
Just a point here that when applicants suggest that they are going to do distant management, the council asks for a robust plan to be presented. The applicant has now indicated that they'll contract with a property management company to perform the day-to-day management duties, and as such, we cannot grant the license until those property management details have been provided to us and the outside consultation regarding that company has been completed.
So are you suggesting we can't proceed any further with this application?
Not at all. No, you can proceed. We just won't be able to grant the license until we've received those details and run the outside consultation process through Police Scotland and so on.
Could I recommend members we adjourn for further discussion on this? Okay, thank you. We'll be a few moments.
Councillor Braun, can you confirm you're back online, please?
I'm back with you, Jess, definitely.
Super. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to go. Okay, thank you. My motion is to accept or grant a license for this application, subject to an additional condition, which will be to grant or a curfew on no social gatherings or live music after 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. Sorry.
That's in the garden too.
And that's in the garden grounds. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your.
Mr. Convener, can I just thank the council for the time? Can I thank you for the time, and also Ms. Engelberts for her assistance in preparing the papers and putting them before the committee? Thank you.